Hello, I'm Scott Steen, Executive Director of the American Physiological Society. I'm here today with Dr. Scott Kirkton, Professor of Biological Sciences at Union College, and Dr. Heidi Walsh, Associate Professor of Biology and Department Chair at Wabash College. APS members conduct research and teach in a wide variety of contexts, and our focus today is being a physiologist in a liberal arts college. Our conversation will be excerpted in the evolution column in APS's Physiologist magazine. So welcome, guys. Welcome, Scott, Heidi. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
So let's start. Just if each of you could talk a little bit about your careers in science, your research focus, how you got to where you are today. Let's start with you, Heidi.
Yeah, so well, I attended a small liberal arts college, and funnily enough, I end up working at one. I started out, I grew up in a small town in West Virginia and went to Allegheny College, which is in northwestern Pennsylvania. And my major there, I was interested in science, but kind of wide-eyed college student, but really got an interest in neuroscience while I was there. And it was at the time, I think there weren't as many colleges that had neuroscience as a major. So I definitely gravitated more toward the biology side of that discipline throughout my time there at Allegheny, and had the chance to get involved with undergraduate research while I was there, both off campus and on campus, which was really probably a shaping experience in my life. And decided that was something that I was interested in pursuing further through graduate study, and went to the University of Virginia, where I got my PhD also in neuroscience. And at the time, I didn't really have a lot of opportunities to do any teaching at that time, and wasn't really on my radar as a career. So I pursued a postdoctoral fellowship at the Scripps Research Institute, the Florida campus, and studied the hormone ghrelin and some of the neuroprotective pathways involved in ghrelin signaling. And it was at that time when I did get the opportunity to kind of test the waters as far as teaching at a local campus that was nearby. And there were some great people there that kind of allowed me to get that experience without having any previous experience before, and gave me a lot of ownership of how I taught. And that was again another shaping experience where I kind of realized I wanted to have my hand in both of those worlds. Research and teaching. And so after my postdoctoral fellowship ended, I pursued some teaching positions, and did one visiting position, and then ended up here at Wabash, and I've been here since 2014.
Great, thank you. Scott?
Right, my story is pretty similar to Heidi's. I'm from a small town in Ohio. I went to Denison University, which is a small liberal arts college. At the time, I was completely pre-med and interested in that's what I thought you did with a biology degree. That's what I thought all you could do with a biology degree. And I had a really excellent faculty member, advisor, that allowed me to do some subtle research after my sophomore year, which really inspired me to want to end up as a college professor. So I made choices in graduate school and as part of my postdoc to end up working at a small liberal arts college. So I went to Arizona State University, did research on insect physiology, because insects are a really tractable model for a small college. And then through an award at the APS, I had a postdoctoral opportunity with Dr. Peter Wagner at UCSD, which really opened my eyes to biomedical research, and I think helped open a lot of doors for me when I applied for jobs. And so I've been at Union College in Schenectady, New York since 2006.
So you really plotted your career. I mean, you started out looking to end up at a liberal arts college.
Yeah, that was my goal. And a couple of times I sort of wavered from that a little bit, but when I chose what I wanted to do for my research, and then obviously getting to work at a medical school and being able to demonstrate having some experience in teaching physiology for medical students, that certainly helped when it came time to interview for small liberal arts jobs.
So Heidi, for you, was this it was a possibility? You were open to different possibilities, but or did you intend to end up in a
Yeah,
liberal arts environment?
I don't really like to use myself as an example for my students of like how to pick a career path, because it kind of feels like not apathetic. I mean, I was enjoying the things I was doing, but I didn't have, too many goals further out from what I was doing at the time. And, I knew I liked research, and I knew that I was interested in continuing to learn more about neuroscience. So that was kind of the main motivation to pursue graduate study. I didn't have a specific career goal in mind at the time. Explored a few things while I was there, but ultimately felt like, I needed more training as a scientist and decided to do a postdoc at that point. And so it was a lot of like opportunities and things happening to work out that worked for me, which is maybe not something people should depend on happening, but that was my path.
I mean, I imagine for both of you, and just being postdocs in a laboratory, there's a lot of pressure that the career path that you should be on is to be at a similar kind of, at a research university. You should be, that is almost the expectation. And I think that's less and less true today. But I think that, there's sort of, I think particularly with a lot of our older school members, it's like, this is the career you should be on. I wonder if either of you had that kind of pressure.
I didn't feel pressure. I think that at the time I was a postdoc, especially being in a biomedical research institute where, I mean, there is an academic structure, but it's, there are no undergraduates there except ones that happen to come in for internships or something. So it definitely was not a career path that other people, my peers seemed to be interested in. But we had a really great education and outreach department at Scripps at the time while I was there, and they were really open to providing postdocs training in things like teaching. So that was an opportunity that we kind of formed for others kind of to open people's eyes about, okay, well, this is another path, even if you are here at a research institute, that you could explore.
What about you, Scott?
So for my postdoc, I was at UCSD in the medical school, and I think it was different. Most of the other postdocs either stayed in research one jobs or went to industry. So it was a bit of a challenge trying to explain my goals, to kind of old school physiologists and APS members, but it was supported. I mean, I think people realized, at least in the early 2000s, the start of the glut of PhDs, and that we can't all end up at R1 schools. And I guess I would say too, I had a lot of explaining to do with what the liberal arts jobs entailed in terms of there's a wide variety, right? Some schools are almost all teaching, and some have, components with a lot of research in it as well. And so I think that was important too, to explain how the big variety that there are.
How would you sort of characterize the mix that you have now between research and teaching? So Scott, why don't you continue?
So for me, it's said it's 50-50. Certainly during the school year, falls a little bit more on teaching, but the research is always going on. I've got the big difference, I think, is that you have undergraduates as your research students as opposed to grad students and postdocs. So the people, they're going to be done in 4 years, right? They're not staying around until they get enough papers out or until they pass their comps or their dissertation. So it's taken me a while to figure out to unlock how to do research with undergrads, to be successful, publishable research. But it's been really rewarding, right? I've been able to help a lot of students see careers outside of what they might have thought they could do. Also, getting to take them to things like EB and now the APS Summit has been really valuable to help them see where their research fits into a bigger perspective.
That's
because
right.
when you're an undergraduate, you don't have. I'm fortunate at my school that we have a large faculty, so there are other physiologists in my department, but not necessarily doing the same sorts of things I do. But when you get to go to a meeting, they get to see how their research fits in the bigger picture. And that's been really valuable.
So you've both been at, I think you've both been in R1 research institutions. And how would you kind of compare and contrast your experience now in a liberal arts environment to being in R1 or in a major research university or institution?
I think the experience feels maybe like a bit more holistic. I mean, obviously I'm a different kind of career scale now than I was when I was at an R1 institution, but you know, there are kind of a lot more focus on developing you as a leader at a liberal arts college, you know, as a faculty member. So you know, you're expected to do research, you're expected to teach and get involved in service, but you know, there's definitely being in a smaller place where there's maybe less bureaucracy and less people to do different jobs. It's expected, you know, as part of like our community that people will step up and help support the mission of the college and support, you know, the overall liberal arts philosophy that we have here, and not just be kind of laser focused on their niche. We're expected to be, you know, have our hands in across the institution, which I don't think was expected, you know, in as much in R1 settings.
You know, I'd imagine you, I think a lot of people in R1 institutions they teach to their specialty and that's all they teach. And I'd imagine you both have to teach much more broadly. And can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, how did your training prepare you for that? Because it seems like that it's hard to come by people who can really teach physiology in a sort of comprehensive way.
I guess I would say that, you know, physiology is that really amazing field in biology that connects, you know, ecology to cell biology. And, you know, when you're in a liberal arts college, you're usually in a biology department, whereas an R1 school might have a department of ecology and evolution. It might have a department of cellular biology, and it might have a department of physiology, right? So I feel like, you know, I'm biased, obviously, but I feel like the physiologists are the kind of glue that holds the department together, right? We're able to connect with our colleagues, both who do subcellular work and do ecological work. And so I think it's really valuable to have a physiologist that's broadly trained, that can think broadly and sort of help students and the colleagues can make these connections back and forth. So, you know, when I started teaching, I got sent, you know, to teach intro bio. And although I had taken that course, obviously, it's not until you actually teach it that you really fully understand it and realize what you know and don't know. And I've had, you know, the ability to then teach upper level courses in physiology and sort of other classes, like a bio dance class to gen ed students about sort of anatomy and physiology and how that works with dance. So I teach it with a dance professor. So I think that holistic view of like the students is really interesting. So, you know, I get to go see my students and go to their sporting events. I get to see them perform in plays and theater productions. It's really, you know, their science part is a really important part to them. They're doing research is a really important part, but it's not their whole thing, which is different than maybe a grad student or a postdoc might be. So I found it to be really valuable in terms of helping train the next generation of not just scientists, but next generation of people who are scientifically literate, right? So not all these people are going to end up going on in science, but I hope they're all more literate about science, you know, because it's such an important thing in government, in policy, in their communities, that they can be more well versed in how to address scientific issues in the future.
There seems to be a real kind of cultural community advantage to being in the liberal arts environment. I mean, there's something special about I think the size and being able to sort of perhaps know your students at a very different level and know your colleagues at a different level. And so I'm wondering if you'd both talk about sort of both the culture as well as sort of other advantages to practicing science in a liberal arts environment.
Yeah, I think there's kind of definitely like a spirit of, entrepreneurship. Like, if you have something you want to achieve, it's kind of on you to find a path to make that happen. Although there's, lots of support in different ways. As we kind of said, maybe you might often be the only person in your discipline or even closely related to your discipline in your department. So there's a lot of freedom in that, which is really nice. In our department, and I think across the college here, especially, we put a lot of trust in our faculty as far as, how they run their courses and their research programs and the experiences they provide for students through their research. We all understand that things are discipline specific and they're, might not look the same across the board. So the freedom is really nice. And, I think the disadvantage is, you kind of do lack that community from time to time within your research discipline. One way that, here at Wabash, I'm the only person that teaches physiology normally and kind of on my own in that respect. But we have a really active APS chapter in Indiana. So that's been a really great way for, me and my students as well to kind of see the discipline in a kind of a broader sense, see how it works at other institutions, have the opportunity to present their research in, a high level environment that they wouldn't get otherwise. So there is a community outside of the liberal arts institution. It's just a matter of finding it.
That's great. Scott, what do you think the advantages for?
I think, we have, we're not, at least most liberal arts colleges aren't, you're not being judged on whether you can get external funding. For tenure, so you do get to sort of pursue what you want to study, where some people I know at R1s, they got to keep the same topic going because their granting cycle demands it. The trade-off is you sort of have to find projects or themes that aren't going to be scooped by people who have lots of postdocs and grad students, right? So it does make kind of like, the sort of initial science fun, right? It's like a kid going out and exploring, right? You're just sort of asking really interesting questions. You can take them wherever you want because you're not being held to this need to fund or to keep a grant going or something like that. The trade-offs obviously are that you have less resources, less startup, typically. You don't have the students that stay for 5 or 6 years like a grad student. So training is a big issue. So I've created a model where I pair younger students with older students to kind of build that kind of lab community and increase the training between the students, a lot of peer help. But for the most part, it's been really rewarding. It was, I'll say, going to my first meeting after getting my job, it was hard to see my colleagues who had gone on to other bigger research schools. They publish a lot more, they get more time, more money for travel, more conferences, because they're not teaching as much. But I found it was rewarding in a different way. So it's, I had to realize that my research expectations had to change a little bit because of the amount of time and money available.
When you really tailored your kind of research focus around the environment that you're in, right?
Right. Yeah. So I study insects, which are easy to keep, relatively cheap compared to vertebrates. There's no IACUC principle, IACUC regulations. Students can easily work with them, as opposed to having a mouse colony where the costs would be really large, which was sort of what my postdoc was focused on.
So Heidi, are you engaged in research as well?
Yes, my lab studies GnRH neurons and their responses at the cellular level to various forms of stress, particularly ER stress. Endoplasmic reticulum stress is what we're most interested in. And in the context of obesity and various diseases that can influence cell signaling. So our model is a cell culture model, which probably is a bit more expensive than insect models, but still, I was fortunate that Wabash already had most of the equipment necessary in order to run a cell culture lab. So that was a big plus. If I had to do over again, I would definitely have explored uh, a more economical model organism for my research. But so far this is working out well, and it's a nice skill for students to have that do want to go into biomedical research to know cell culture and those types of techniques and get those under their belt before they go elsewhere.
So as I've talked to postdocs on sort of making that decision, and I think very often I've been finding people who don't want to stay in the traditional kind of research career path, who just don't feel comfortable in that environment, and who are looking for other kinds of opportunities. So what kind of advice would you give someone who is at a large research university who might be thinking about a liberal arts college as a career path?
So we've been doing a lot of hiring recently, tenure track jobs, including hopefully a new ecophysiologist next year. I think for our school, in order to get tenure, you need to be a good teacher, but you also need to be a successful researcher, publish papers. So it's, ideally the candidate that would apply for a job at our school would have some teaching experience, may not be a lot, but something, so that we know that they want to do that. And would also have a successful research program in which they could incorporate undergraduates in terms of, the scale of it, in terms of the resources they would need to be successful. Those are important qualities, because we can always mentor someone in getting them to be a better teacher. But, in terms of research, they're kind of, we can give advice and things, but, they may be, in some places, maybe the only physiologist there. So it's important that they be a successful enough researcher that they can create their own lab and get their own questions started.
That's great. Heidi.
I would say, maybe to kind of think more broadly about how colleges and, higher education works as you go into considering that career. Because, especially at a small liberal arts college, you will be called upon to get involved, outside of your department. I mean, even as a department chair, you're kind of part of the next level of how the college works and how it functions. And, so I think having an interest in that and kind of working to support the institution outside of just what you do in your classroom and lab is an important thing. Somebody that thinks they would enjoy that, it's hard to get direct experience in that maybe before you start applying for jobs, but to kind of have that willingness to contribute in other ways besides teaching and research, I think is, for your own career satisfaction, something to think about before you apply.
Yeah, I was good. Is there any personality type you think just would not work in a liberal arts context, and that the kind of people you might have known as postdocs yourselves, you thought, yeah, that would never have happened. They could not have succeeded in this environment.
So it's funny you asked that. So I asked my college advisor about that when I was looking at these kinds of jobs. And he had this great analogy, which kind of goes back to what Heidi's saying about the sort of service that you're kind of invested in the college. And he described it as if you're at an R1 school in a big department, and you don't pull your weight, or you're kind of a curmudgeon-y type that gets, could be pushed off in the corner. You're like on an aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier is going to keep steaming ahead. You don't need to have that person participating at the full level, and it's still going to get the mission done because you're just one person of a large number of people. But at a liberal arts college, you're kind of like on a clipper ship where everybody has to pitch in, right, and pull on the ropes and get the sails going in the right direction. And so if you're not willing to roll up your sleeves and help the department or help the college, it's going to be an uncomfortable environment for you and as well as for your colleagues. So it's really an important part where everyone has to sort of pitch in. You
are conspicuous in a liberal arts college. I mean, there's nowhere to hide.
Right.
And Heidi, what do you think? That sound right to you?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. you're going to be called to do things you never probably thought you would do, help with student recruitment, work with admissions, network with prospective students at a sporting event. There's all these little things that ultimately play into the success of the college and your job ultimately. So it's important to be invested in it, because, we care about the education of the students and their experiences here, but, we also want to have our own sustainability for our own job purposes. And we want to, I think, at least at Wabash, we want to see the institution thrive and survive long term. So yeah, that's a great analogy. Everybody's got to pull their weight.
Yeah, I've served on the board of trustees at Union College. I've served on the search committee for the president and vice presidents of different aspects of the college, not just academic affairs, but also finance and college relations. It's been a really eye-opening experience. And, like Heidi said, I met with a volleyball recruit the other day because I'm affiliated. I'm the mentor for the volleyball team. So it's been a lot of fun getting to work with students and, understand how a college functions.
Any closing thoughts, Heidi?
I would just say a little bit about teaching physiology. Maybe it's really fun. It's so nice because there's always student buy-in. People want to know how their bodies work and are interested in diseases. So that, I have an easy sell compared to maybe some of my colleagues in the biology department that have other specialties. So I definitely recognize that privilege, but it's a fun discipline to teach in as well, kind of for some things Scott mentioned earlier. It's often like a putting it together course for students where they see, okay, well, here's a physics concept that interplays here, and here's how some cell biology interplays and evolution. And so it's really a fun discipline to be a part of as an educator.
Great, thank you.
Scott. I would add that, it's a lot different than teaching as a grad student, right? Where you're not teaching 300, 400 students. You're teaching maybe, my largest class is about 40, and you really get to know the students. And, part of your job is to, help nurture them, help them find passion, academic passion, which is kind of what I sort of surround myself about, try to help them figure out what they want to be. And it's been really, really rewarding. And I would also say that when you get to do research with students, and get to take them to meetings, it's amazing to have colleagues, APS colleagues, come up and say, "Oh, I thought that was a master's student," or "I thought that was a PhD student." And they're undergrads, because I think at liberal arts colleges, the training they get in terms of communication, in terms of critical thinking, we have some amazing undergrads that produce research at the quality of master's students or some in early PhD students. And so I've been really fortunate. I didn't realize how good the students would be in terms of working with them. So it's been really rewarding. My PhD advisor, John Harrison, once, when I was sort of going back and forth between working at a liberal arts college, like I thought I wanted to, or going into an R1 school, he said at the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed, are you going to want to be surrounded by papers? You're going to be surrounded by people. He always was focused on people. And so he said, you could do that in both places, but think about what would make you happier, right? Publishing a lot or getting to influence the lives of a lot of people. And so for me, this was the best way to do that.
That's great advice. Thank you both. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate your time.